Today, we want to talk about how AI companies are forming. I think that this was a pretty big story in 2024, and even back in 2023, of course, with Microsoft partnering with OpenAI, which is a whole different conversation, Jaden. But then, as Microsoft essentially acqui-hired all of Inflection AI, and the big story here, I think, is how are companies forming? Because, guys, this is going to have huge implications because when we're talking about regulatory frameworks and things like that, governments do not like big companies just buying other big companies. But what does it mean when these big companies need these other companies to really grow? And Nvidia is the biggest of the biggest. They are creating the hardware for everybody, and they have just bought, is it acquiring Jaden Run AI for, I think, $700 million, which is, I think they're from Israel, this company. But they are doing something that NVIDIA desperately needs. We saw this with Perplexity when Perplexity was buying smaller companies. But in this case, Jaden, what can you tell us about what this says, this acquisition, which may seem like kind of an article that people might just skim over? And why should we be pausing on this? Because you and I were having a great conversation offline about this.
Yeah, no. So I think this is really interesting because this is indicative of what we're going to see for all AI companies, including Anthropic and OpenAI, doing acquisitions into the future. In the current regulatory environment, acquisitions are incredibly difficult. They get stalled by regulators frequently, not even just in the United States, but also overseas in Europe. And so the way that this was acquired, and a first thing I'll say is the 700 million isn't confirmed. But this is kind of what leaked reports are saying. And this is impressive because this is a company that's essentially helping companies manage their GPUs that they're using for AI. So they're helping them to manage that. This is obviously something very interesting to Nvidia, who's deeply in this field. And so they want this technology. But the problem is making an acquisition today is very difficult. And I'm curious to see if that changes because in the new administration, David Sachs, who's formerly on, well, maybe he's still on the All In podcast. I don't know. He hasn't shown up for like a month or so. But he just got named as the AI and crypto czar. And so I would be curious I'd be curious to see if the merger acquisition environment warms up. But as it stands, it has not. And so it's really interesting how this acquisition happened. They essentially acquired for 700 million. And then they said that they are planning to open source the software. This is crazy. They're essentially spending almost $1 billion and then just saying, okay, and we're going to give it away to everyone for free. Another thing that's interesting is they're literally opening this up. So Run AI currently only supports NVIDIA's GPUs, but when they open source this, the software is going to essentially enable it to extend its availability to the entire AI ecosystem. So you could imagine other companies are going to get a piece of this. So it's kind of like, it's kind of funny to me because it's like they're buying this for a ton of money, they're open sourcing it and letting their competitors in. But I think this is just the way they have to do it. And I think it speaks to the fact of NVIDIA has so much money, but they probably desperately need this piece of software. So they're like, look, if we give it away for free, that's fine. We're going to make so much money off of just kind of owning and controlling and being able to integrate it deeply that it's worth it for us. The last thing I want to bring up is the parallels that we see with like an earlier acquisition that Microsoft did when Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard. So this is a big gaming company. They acquired it for $68 billion, which is insane. But antitrust regulators froze the deal. They weren't letting it happen. And so in order to essentially appease them and get this deal to go through, they had to license Activision's number one title, which is Call of Duty, right? The big, one of the biggest video games of all time. They have to license this to other platforms for about 10 years. And after they said that, they're like, look, we're going to give our biggest game. We're going to license it to other people for 10 years. Then they're like, okay, fine, you can like acquire this company. That was part of the deal. So people are having to make these kind of like almost bend over backwards deals to appease regulators. And it seems that Nvidia in this case is literally open sourcing and potentially giving away their software they spent almost $1 billion on for completely free.
This is an amazing development, actually. And it kind of goes to also the open sourcing thing. So folks out there, you've probably heard, and maybe you guys are big experts on this, but I know sort of a lot of folks out there listening are learning just as we often learn too. But in terms of open sourcing, right, you kind of hear about some of those open sourcing companies. Like Meta is, there's a small difference between open sourcing and open weights, which we don't have to go into. But essentially, let's just call it kind of open sourcing for now. And why would Meta even do that? Like, why would Meta essentially give away Llama? Well, we have to understand that some of these things when enterprises use them, then they are paying fees and things like that. But also, there's a lot of reasons to open source things anyway. But in this particular case, it's especially interesting because NVIDIA really did this just to get around regulators. As Jaden says, spending almost $1 billion, because you're right, the 700 million, I've also seen like $800 million somewhere as well, in order just to get around regulations. And so what could the government possibly say? But why does this work in NVIDIA? Well, another reason, Jaden, as sort of you and I were talking offline, is that it kind of is brilliant because at the moment, Run AI only works with NVIDIA GPUs. So we have more competition coming out with GPUs. I mean, Amazon and others are creating a ton of new kind of like AI chips and things like that. But it doesn't actually really impact the market dominance so much with NVIDIA because other people can, of course, use this open source. But if Run right now is only using that, even if it gives them, let's call it a 6-month head start or something like that, think about how much money they can make. And NVIDIA's, what are they, like a $3 trillion company? So for a lot of reasons, this makes sense. But the real thing that we want to talk about here, guys, and I know that we're not always into all the economics of it, but it really is critical because when think about the other kind of acqui-hire of Microsoft with Inflection, right? They wanted essentially Mustafa Suleyman, who was running Inflection. They wanted Inflection's way of doing things because they wanted to build that into Copilot because they wanted Copilot to have what Inflection had. Inflection was another competitor, a large language model competitor. Inflection was outstanding at being empathetic, at having conversations, all that kind of stuff. And Microsoft is thinking, well, heck, we have eyeballs of 2 billion people or whatever using Office. And what we really want is something like a better Clippy, you know what I mean? Like something that can actually really relate to the people because people don't just use Microsoft Office at work. We want to integrate this into their entire lives. But they couldn't just buy Inflection, a $4 billion company. What did they have to do? They had to essentially hire everybody out of that company, essentially, which is what they did. So when NVIDIA is looking at this, they are taking a new approach to acquisitions as well. But it really changes where these companies are going. And Jaden, to me, that's what's so interesting is that I haven't seen this before. I don't know if you have before, but I have not seen anything like how we're sort of like looking at the new ways of one company acquiring another. And I think we're just going to see more and more innovation in this space, right?
Yeah, 100%. And to be fair, like this is a company that is quite good. Obviously, Nvidia is going to benefit greatly by having their software.
Yeah.
They claim they could do 10 times more workloads on the same infrastructure because they have dynamic scheduling, GPU pooling, GPU fractioning. So they have a bunch of really impressive strategies to essentially let you get 10 times the workload. So this is impressive, especially as we start looking at, models like O3 coming from OpenAI, that the only constraint is compute and cost, essentially, to these things getting smarter. So companies like Run AI are going to be really great. Now, you mentioned the stock price. I just wanted to bring this up because I thought this was really interesting. We're seeing Nvidia on this news. Nvidia's up 4% today, which is fantastic. But you know
Oh
who
my
else is up today? Is AMD is up 3% today. And I almost wonder if a big chunk of that is as Nvidia is buying something like Run AI and saying we're going to open this up to the full ecosystem. I wonder if we're going to see downstream benefits to companies like AMD being able to get in. We're seeing Intel's kind of taking a boost. So this is pretty interesting to me right now. Now, with all that being said, I kind of wanted to wrap this up and talk a little bit about the vision and where they believe this is going. Talking a little bit about the early days before this company was obviously such a big success.
Yeah.
They said everyone on the planet. Okay, so they're talking about what the future is going to look like with AI, and they said everyone on the planet would be interacting with AI daily, and it would be obvious that every company would be leveraging AI in one way or another. And mind you, this is when Run and Nvidia kind of started having early talks. When Run was getting started back in 2018, the market, Nvidia's market cap was only around 100 billion. So like you mentioned, we're at 3 trillion now. So once you get into the trillions, like this is massive bump from this 100 billion. But they said it would be obvious that every company would be leveraging AI in one way or another. The only thing preventing that vision from becoming a reality, according to them, was the lack of efficiency and the cost associated with training AI models and running them in production on multiple GPU clusters. So they actually nailed that, because as we're seeing today with models like the O3 model coming out of OpenAI, that is literally the only constraint. And so they said to solve this problem, they pitched an idea of creating an orchestration layer between AI models and GPUs that would enable a much more efficient use of the underlying compute resources, leading to faster training times and significantly reduced costs. So, like, I just think it's interesting, and the timing's interesting as we have OpenAI coming out and saying, look, we have this amazing model, but it's going to cost $1,000 in compute to like give the best response. And then Nvidia's like, oh shoot, you guys cracked the code. Let's go hire the number one company that's going to help us optimize kind of this flow and make this cheaper. So I think this is interesting, and it makes a lot of sense, this acquisition. I'm excited to see what happens. I think whether you're super interested in NVIDIA or Run AI, look out for this same playbook, this same strategy. We're going to see this in 2025 from OpenAI, from Anthropic as they acquire new companies. This seems to be where this industry is going. So I'm excited, and we'll keep you up to date on all of it. If you enjoyed the podcast today, if you learned anything new, the number one thing that we would ask for New Year's, and a big happy New Year's to everybody, is if you could leave us a New Year's review. It is a new year and a new you. And if you haven't left a review yet, it is time to turn over the leaf and drop a review. We read them, we love them all, and we hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.